recall the times that you have ranked up after staying at a certain level for a period of time, and suddenly your rank starts to rise, and tell me if this is something that you relate with. Oftentimes when I've ranked up in the past, it feels like I haven't improved. It just feels like everyone else got worse. I remember playing games that would get me to the next level that I'd been trying to get to and feeling like I didn't do anything special. I feel like it was my opponents who just made a bunch of mistakes that allowed me to win. So it's like, am I really getting better, or are my opponents getting worse? I think maybe it might have something to do with the fact that sometimes improvement is not about learning something new, but rather than solidifying and strengthening what you've already learned. Welcome to Start Point, the show about Go for Go fans away from the board. And let's talk about diagnosing our Go condition and trying to clean up our act, so to speak, in terms of what we do on the Go board. Because yes, there's one side of the equation in terms of how to improve. You need to soak up new knowledge and learn new things, try new things, and, learn fancy Tesujis and Joseki and strengthen your reading. But other times, we have a lot of stuff that we should be doing or we should know how to do already, and yet it doesn't click during the game, and we make these mistakes and they keep us down and we lose games because of them. It's kind of like having a sickness or some kind of ailment. And what do? Let's say you have some stomach pains. Well, you try some home remedies. Maybe you'll take a painkiller or an antacid, or maybe you'll just avoid eating at a certain restaurant that you feel like maybe caused the stomach ache. And if that's all it took to get rid of your stomach ache, then great. No further steps needed. You solved your problem. But what if it persists? Well, the common advice is you go to the doctor, someone who knows what they're talking about. And when you get to the doctor will assess you in many ways. Listen to your heartbeat, make sure your breathing is normal. I mean, maybe if you're complaining about stomach aches, that's not really the most relevant things, but it's just good practice to check. Sometimes the doctor will know exactly what it is and prescribe you a specific medication for exactly your situation. Other times the doctor won't know. They'll just kind of be like, let's try, you know what? Why don't you try avoiding gluten? That's my best educated guess. And you can report back to me and we'll see if that solved the issue. Where am I going with this? I want to treat our gameplay in Go as something with symptoms. There are things that we do that are kind of not really right, not healthy, maybe is a good way to put it. And we need to figure out what's causing the issue. And so I want to walk you guys through this process of giving yourself a diagnosis of what's going wrong with your Go game and trying to narrow that down and analyze it so we can find a treatment for it. Because instead of searching for solutions all the time, maybe sometimes we need to slow down and try to figure out what the problem is. Maybe we are guilty of looking at our game and going, you know what, I need to work on Tesuji, or you know what, I need to learn more Joseki, without really even thinking about, like, what am I actually doing wrong in the game? So let's go through this. I think the main thing that we can do to try to diagnose our own Go condition is keep a record of the biggest reason you lost each game. So when you look at a game, I mean, it can be overwhelming to do a self-review sometimes. I often get carried away. I will look through the game, I'll click through a couple moves, and I'll be like, ooh, what's the proper Joseki response to this move? And then I'll branch off into a million, and I've already spent like 10 minutes on the second move or something. And I'm like, I don't have enough energy to look at the rest of the game. probably not the best way to look at your game. I would suggest, if you want to, of course, if you're very diligent and you have all the time in the world, doing a thorough review of every game probably pretty good. But if you're like me, you don't have all the time in the world, maybe the best thing to do is to try to flip through your SGF and see if there's a story that stands out to you. What happened during the game? You tried to play territorial in the beginning and your opponent made it complicated, and or maybe your opponent forced himself to get massive amounts of influence and you realized there was no way to handle the Moyo and you did some crazy invasion. There's a story you can tell with every game, and so when you look at the story that it tells, it doesn't take too much, right? Because you just played the game. You can remember what happened, how you were feeling, and you can just kind of flip through and see, can you summarize the game? Once you've done that, you can then start to think about, and I would suggest doing this without AI first. Of course, it's going to be faster if you use AI to just kind of go to the point where you see the AI evaluation jump from one end to the other. But if you have the time and the brain power, then maybe look at your game without AI and look at the SGF and the story that it tells and see if you can answer this one question. What is the biggest reason that I lost this game? There are a number of reasons that it could be. For example, you lost a giant group. That's going to kill you in the game. Or maybe you made a critical reading mistake. Maybe there was a point in the game where you knew you played too emotionally, which kind of got you ignoring the big picture. Or maybe you played too conservatively or defensively and didn't take enough points and let your opponent walk all over you. Or maybe you chased a dragon and you couldn't kill it. Sometimes we have moves that we play inefficiently because we have poor life and death understanding. Or you just don't know why you lost. Whatever the reason is, see if you can try to sum it up as best you can, but just be careful because you have to make sure you go to the root of the issue. Oftentimes we will think we solved our biggest reason, or we think we've identified our biggest reason why we lost, but maybe that's just a symptom of some bigger cause. Often, like you'll see someone say that they'll analyze their game and they'll say, I think I lost because I made this stupid reading mistake over here. And sure, maybe that's a big reading mistake. But if you show it to a stronger player, oftentimes what they'll say is like, hey, like you shouldn't have been in that situation in the first place. Like you ended up in that situation where you like were vulnerable to making a all or nothing reading mistake because you played this way in the opening. So it's important to try to nail the root of the issue instead of just looking at the surface things, because I think that's the thing that always gets us is when we try to self-diagnose, we sometimes get a little narrow-minded and we try to fix our own problems at a surface level, and instead of trying to go back a little bit and finding the root issue. Like I think it goes the other way as well. Sometimes people get a little too hung up on the root issue. They get hung up on the maybe opening moves. They're like, oh, I played this part poorly in the opening. And then at the end of the day, the real advice maybe that you need to give them is, oh, you need to strengthen your reading skills. Like, okay, yes, you like that you're doing a little bit of nitpicking here with the opening. At this point, that doesn't matter. What really matters is that you missed this Atari right here. Like that, it can go both ways. So we have to, it's very hard. This is why it's actually very important to get a teacher to look at your thoughts and your game and to see if you can get another perspective on the issue. But as far as self-diagnosing goes, I think that keeping a record of your biggest reasons can help increase our consciousness of what we should be doing or what has been going wrong with our game. Without that, sometimes I think it's harder to recognize, especially if we don't review at all, because during the game, we're very often narrow-minded and we're just kind of focused on a singular strategy and we're not able to look back. So I think it's very helpful to look at the game, take a breather, and look back and analyze it from a kind of leisurely rate, because oftentimes during an actual game, you're kind of sweaty, you don't know what to do, and you're kind of thinking about a million things at once, and you're not able to see the big picture. You're not able to breathe and analyze your game freely. And so that's the main thing I think you can do, is to keep track of the big reasons why you lost. But if you also still want to review your game a little bit further while keeping your review time to a minimum, I think another strategy that you can use, one that I kind of use sometimes, is to find the concrete mistakes that you know. Because I think oftentimes we'll look at AI evaluations and we'll look at like kind of the blue moves and we'll just be like, oh, that one is a mistake because AI said so, without really understanding. But there are other mistakes where you even know during the game. You'll play a move and you'll be like, oh, I know I misread that. I know that wasn't the right move. Or when you're reviewing, you'll find some Tsuji that you should be able to find, but you just couldn't see. Things that are very concrete. I want to contrast those with things that are kind of like you're not sure why it works. Leave those alone for now. Let's find the ones that you can concretely say, oh, this is the better move, and I can explain why after reviewing it. And try to study those and put those in your brain by playing those sequences out. And there are certain different types of these smaller concrete mistakes, is maybe what I would call them. Like there are missed Tsujis, like I just mentioned. Sometimes these concrete mistakes are just mistakes, like self-Atari, right? You can either self-Atari, you can miss a snapback, you can miss something obvious, right? We all do that. We all make those mistakes from time to time. I would say that like for those mistakes, I'm not sure it's going to be really useful to review those mistakes and study them for an extended period of time. Those things should maybe sort themselves out. I would maybe suggest playing faster games if you're making those kinds of mistakes, because it'll force you to make those mistakes and be really, have an eagle eye to see if you can find those dumb mistakes and make sure you don't make them. Because with the fast games, it's really just important not to make those really dumb mistakes. Another of those small mistakes that a little more on the concrete side is when you do the AI evaluation and you see a blue move. And by the way, when I say blue move, I mean like the top AI suggestion move. It's often blue on the interface. Oftentimes you'll go over an AI evaluation and a single spot on the board will flash blue every turn, because both players had been ignoring this big point. And for me, when I look at these moves, I often can't really see why it's so big. Like, I mean, I can kind of be convinced, but when I actually look at it, and if I were to try to explain to someone why that one's so big, sometimes I won't know. And I mean, that's a lot of go. We can't always explain the reasoning. And sometimes those reasonings that even stronger players give seem kind of wishy-washy. So I think maybe one strategy we can use to try to train ourselves to see those big moves that you're supposed to see, maybe meditate on it. Just look at it, reflect on it, think about it, ponder it. Make it a theme in your games. When you're looking at similar situations, just have it in your consciousness. Like, oh, what kind of situation is this? And just kind of ask yourself those questions and really focus on it. I feel like that could help bring you along, because the next time you see those kinds of moves, I feel like you may be less surprised when the AI is suggesting it over and over again. And of course, you can ask a stronger player as well. So, with all that said, I want to also emphasize another aspect of all this, because it's all fun and good, like to try to self-diagnose by looking at your SGFs and stating the big reasons. But I think it's important to really reinforce your learning with some concrete steps. One of those things I think is pretty important to do is to not just think about it, not just think about the big reasons of your game or the big reasons that you lost your game, but also write them down. It also helps to, even if there are things that you really need to remember, to speak them out loud. With multi-pronged approaches to learning, I think the more things or the more ways that we get involved with our learning, the better coded these things could be in our brains. And so you can write, you can speak, and you can play in the actual game while thinking about this new thing that you're trying to enter into your consciousness. And so by doing all these things, I think you can create a bigger experience of those mistakes that you're trying to grapple with. And so what can we do? We can look at our SGFs, all our SGF files. I personally like to download every SGF that I have, whether I'm playing on Fox or OGS. I just look at, all the servers should have a way to download the SGF that you just played, and keeping a record of it on my own computer. And I'll just go in and write at the maybe first move of the game after looking through, like, hey, this is what I think cost me the game, and I just kind of write the story down. Because writing obviously is going to give you the benefit of being able to review what you thought about the games at the time when you go back and look at it. But I think also writing it down will create a habit, right? If you just kind of say, like, I'm going to look at the game and just review and think about what went wrong, it's easy to fall out of the habit. But I think the thing is that if you write every time what the biggest reason is, then you can start a habit that reinforces these ideas in your head. And I think you're more likely to think about these things during your next game if you've written down these reasons again and again, and you'll likely begin to notice patterns that you hadn't noticed before. Another exercise that you can do that is similar is to go through the past games that you have already and write the biggest reasons you lost. You can also do the biggest reasons you won. I'd like to hear your thoughts on that. I personally feel like there's not as much value, but maybe someone could convince me otherwise, to try to analyze your opponent's game. Maybe there's something about always looking at the game from two sides instead of just your own side. Maybe I'm not strong enough to know that yet, but that is an idea as well. And again, try to do this without AI first, if you can, and see if you can identify the correct tipping point in the game. Although also when you do kick in the AI, I would say oftentimes AI, obviously on the board, the pure board side of things, AI is just going to be right. But oftentimes AI won't know the qualitative story of the game, and your perception of the tipping point may be more important than the AI. So just take it with a grain of salt. And also, it's always great to try to see a strong player's insight. I remember seeing a self-review that a strong player was doing one time, and he was like, oh, this move that my opponent made, this is when I knew that I would win this game, because he fell into my trap. And if you look at the AI evaluation at that moment, it wasn't a bad move. The evaluation was pretty much still 50-50. But right at that move, the AI evaluation started sloping in the player's favor. So it's like he kind of predicted it would basically spiral out of control for his opponent after that point. So that's just one example of like where the AI may not exactly illustrate the tipping point as correctly as maybe someone who understands exactly what's going on in the game. So it's important to involve other people. It's a tricky thing, but all of this advice, I think, is just kind of to say, let's try to increase our consciousness of the mistakes that we keep on making And how can we do that? And one of the things that we can do is keeping a little journal or log of our mistakes and things like that. And so by doing this, you're going to notice, oh, I tend to lose a lot of games because my group dies. Why is that? And maybe your first thought is to just keep all your groups safe. And maybe that'll work. And maybe that'll boost you up to the next rank. Maybe it won't work. But that's the first step in creating a treatment plan for your Go condition. So you should probably look at some amount of games, whether it's a handful or a month's worth of games, and try to find a pattern and try to find what are the most common issues. So it's like you do a mini analysis of the game itself, and then you do a macro analysis of a larger collection of games and see what your Go condition is. And so based on what you think it is, what the biggest possible time well spent would be for your mistakes would be based on what kind of mistakes you think you've been making in your past games. So for example, if you've been making too many inefficient moves because you are unsure of life and death situations where you feel like you're playing too many redundant moves because you're scared of dying, or you just keep on dying because your life and death, you think things are alive when they're not. Very straightforward solution to that. Do some more basic life and death study. Really isolate those shapes that you find in your game and see what kind of moves are out there to prod and poke at them and how to defend against them. And also look at more of the basic life and death shapes that you should probably know. Or what if your assessment of all your games is that you're too aggressive? You go way too far out, you overplay, and you end up losing groups and things like that. Just try to play more defensively. Try to dial it back. Go is about balance. It's not necessarily about always being offensive or always being defensive. It's about finding the middle ground where you're more reasonable and your play is going to be fruitful by the amount of aggression and defense that you put in. Because too much of one thing is always going to be too bad. So if you're too defensive, maybe try to tell yourself to play more aggressively. And then in 10 games time, if you're still playing one way or another, then really ramp it up, right? Just, you're going to have to, it's the thing I talked about in an episode way back about the tennis thing, where I was trying to hit it over the net with my serve and it was going way out of bounds. And my coach told me, just hit the net. Like, I want you to hit the net. And I tried to hit the net and it still went over the net. And I mean, eventually I did a serve that was a good serve, but I didn't even end up hitting the net. So it was just kind of like, you have to really swing it back one way or another, depending on which way you're leaning. And sometimes you have to be drastic about it. Another situation you might find yourself in is you're losing all your games peacefully. If you're doing something like that, maybe look for ways to spice up the game. Try some pincers. Maybe look at your opponent and focus on their weaknesses. Maybe sometimes that there are two types of players, where one will focus on their weaknesses and trying to fix them, and the other will focus on the opponent's weaknesses and try to attack them. I feel like I'm more of the aggressive type, but some people may find themselves being too protective of their own groups, and that can often lead us not to be conscious of our opponent's weaknesses as well. So it's not a easy thing to do, to create a treatment plan for whatever Go condition that you have, because it's kind of like your eyeball trying to see itself, right? You don't know what you don't know. And what I mean, that may be a very obvious statement, but what I mean by that is that, like, there are things you know that you don't know, and there are things that you know, but there are things that you don't know that you don't know. Does that make sense? So, I mean, these are all efforts to try to do things or try to make the best of the situation we're in, where we don't have the resources, but if at all possible, reach out to someone stronger that you know, reach out to a Go teacher, Or you can reach out to the online communities of Reddit or GoKibitz. People are often very, very willing to help out. So if you have a question you're curious about that you just can't really, figure out, go ahead and post something on Reddit, or you can even send me your question. I mean, I can't give you a detailed review on the podcast, but I can give you maybe some general coaching if you're a DDK. Please don't send me your stuff if you are strong enough to beat me, because I will not have much. I mean, maybe I will have something valuable to say, but probably not as much as if you're more around the DDK level. And then once you've created a treatment plan and you've tried something out, you have to go back and review, is your treatment plan working? And see if you need to diagnose yourself again. Do you have the same issue? Or have you noticed maybe your diagnosis was wrong? Have you thought more about your issue and maybe realized that the real cause of the issue? Always thinking about these things is going to help. And so I think you can even make it a longer term review, and months later, you can go back to your original review and see if you've learned anything. Does your SGF, when you flip through it, does it look weird? Do you feel like you know more than the person playing this game right now? Or do you feel like nothing's really changed? Hopefully you feel like you've learned more and you feel like that person's moves are weird. But you'll often find things that you'll often have a mix. I think that's the most common. You'll be like, I think I would not play this today because I know better, but there are still issues here that I see that I'm still making. And so oftentimes, going back months into your old game files can bring to light, which issues are consistently coming up for you. And it can help you kind of isolate and narrow down those issues so that you can work on them. Go Magic is a fantastic resource for anyone who wants to improve their game or learn anything about Go, because they've got it all. Go to gomagic.org and get 25% off your very first purchase by using my code STARPOINT at checkout. That's STARPOINT without any spaces at gomagic.org. I talk a lot about advice to improve, and I honestly don't know what I'm talking about, because if I did, I would be a Dawn player by now. But I'm just spitballing here. Hopefully, maybe you can take some of my words, be inspired to apply some of the ideas to your own game. Maybe you can provide your own ideas on how to improve. I'm really just kind of almost keeping a journal of the way that I feel like maybe I can do something to improve my game. And speaking of that, what's my own Go diagnosis? My recent diagnosis comes from a development of previous diagnoses, where a while back I felt like I had noticed I was losing a lot of games because I was creating a lot of bad weak groups and not really taking care of them, or I was unable to take care of them because of the situation that I put myself in. And so I thought, okay, let's play more conservatively, let's play more defensively, let's play more solidly. And I was successful in that because I stopped losing giant groups as a way of losing my games. But then I felt like I was running into games where I was kind of not in control. I didn't feel like I was in control, and my opponent just kind of took more points than I did. So between these two extremes, I found a new insight that's a little more specific and detailed about my games, where I feel like maybe one big misunderstanding that I have is about when to save my stones and when to sacrifice them in terms of dividing my opponent's groups. This is something that I felt that I understood. And if you had asked me a while back, I would just be like, yeah, I know when you're supposed to save your stones or when you're supposed to just let your opponent take them, like in terms of dividing the group. When your opponent has two weak groups, then divide them. If your opponent has two strong groups, then just, let them take your stones. But it's not that simple. You have to know what weak means, like how weak should those groups be and how strong should those groups be. And so I'm going to try to look at the examples that I've found in my games where I didn't really make the right decision regarding whether it's worth dividing my opponent's groups. And with the answer at hand, I'm going to just try to internalize and really think about and meditate on why that is the case and why I didn't make the right move. And by doing that, hopefully I can embody that in my next few games. And I'll try to think about it in my next few games and be conscious of it. And I think the thing is that the fact that when you diagnose yourself, it becomes like an object in your mind and you can kind of run with it and it becomes a story. Whereas if you don't like take the time to recognize your mistakes, each mistake is just kind of like its own thing and not part of a bigger pattern. It's harder to notice anything different changing about your understanding. So hopefully by calling attention to this issue that I feel like I've identified, I can improve my sense and my judgment on when I should be splitting my opponent's groups and when I should just be letting those stones be. And so I'll see if I can report back to you, hopefully with some positive news and developments. But in the meantime, it's time for the DDK Advice Corner. And the tip of the day is take a base before it's too late. Now, this is very basic, fundamental advice, and it's something that you should understand if you want to improve. When you put a stone down, let's say on the side of the board, typically that stone will have two options for a base, one side or the other side. Now, what do you think you should do if your opponent blocks one of those sides or takes up one of those sides? You should take a base along the other side. And typically that's going to be very, very urgent. So if you have a stone with two options for bases, one side or another, and your opponent plops a stone down next to that stone on one side, it's going to be usually pretty urgent to take the other side as a base. Because otherwise your opponent's going to take that other side and you're just going to have this floating stone without any eye space. And you're going to have to babysit that stone for a while, and your opponent will be able to get a lot of moves that benefit them. So take a base before it's too late. Very, very, very important. Now it's time for some Go news. The first piece of Go news is a couple of championships coming up in Europe. The European Youth Championship and the European Professional Championship. These championships will be held in Hamburg, and the Youth Championship will be scheduled for the 21st to the 23rd of March. And the Professional Championship, which is the seventh professional championship, is planned for the 20th to the 23rd of March as well. I mean, they're pretty much at the same time. But the Professional Championship will feature 6 European professionals who will play a round robin, and these professionals include Mateusz Surma, Artem Kachanovsky, Ali Jabarin, Stanislav Frelak, Andriy Kravets, and Tanguy Lecalve. I've mentioned a lot of these names on the podcast before, so I do recognize a lot of them. Doesn't mean that I know how to pronounce them, but I apologize for any butchering. Keep an eye out for these tournaments, though, because they will be broadcast on OGS and commented live on the EGF Twitch channel by top European players. So look out for that. In the next piece of news, the Lanka Cup qualifiers. Michael Chen was defeated by Alex Chi in round 3 to join Ryan Lee in the Lanka Cup World Weiqi Open on April 24th, 2024. So the qualifiers from North America the qualified individuals from North America are Ryan Lee and Alex Chi. The game where Alex Chi bested Michael Chen was a co-fight filled game. I did a little flip through, and historically, Michael Chen has had an advantage in terms of wins and losses over Alex Chi in AGA in-person tournaments with a record of 5-2. So this was a good win for Alex Chi. Congratulations for qualifying. I'll keep you updated when the Lanka Cup happens. Shin Jin-seo turns 24 March 17th and celebrates with his Chinese A-League team with a Go board cake. I guess this is a thing. This is the second Go board cake news that I've covered. I wish I had a Go board cake, but I don't know if anyone would have any bakers here would have the understanding of what they were doing when they were making a Go board cake. But it looks like a pretty nice cake. And with his 24th birthday also came his 1000th game professionally. And of those 1000 games, he has a record-breaking 78.96 win rate. So that's 788 wins, 1 draw, 210 losses, and 1 nullified game. They say you can't draw and Go, but apparently you can. And I think there was a nullified game because of an error with an online match, probably during... Oh, no, it was in the Nongshim Cup in 2022, where there was an error on the computer, I guess, and that was invalidated. But anyway, a record-breaking 78.96% win rate with 1,000 games, big milestone. In comparison, some of the other, this is a Korean article, so it compares it to Korean pros, but some of the other Korean pros that had high win records at 1,000 matches. Cho Eun-yeon had a 78.62% win rate at 1,000 matches. Pretty close. Lee Chang-ho, 78.8%. And Lee Se-dol, which is 71.17%, and Park Jong-won, 74.2%. They're all pretty high and pretty close, but Shin Jin-seo has beaten them all with the 1,000 game milestone. And with that, it's time for listener mail. Ryan writes in, "Hi Justin, first I wanted to say thank you so much for producing this podcast. I've been listening for a few months now, slowly working my way through the episodes, and I have been really enjoying it. I listen on Spotify and their comments option was too limiting in the number of characters, so I'm emailing instead." Well, Ryan, the Spotify comments no one really uses anyway. I'm glad you decided to email. I guess there's a character limit. It's also like you can't use it on desktop and it's just on mobile, so figures. But anyway, Ryan says, "There's 2 topics I'd like to write to you about. The first is I was happy to hear you talk about Rocket League on the show. I used to play it a ton and my rank got to around Champion 1. I focused on improving at the game, and while I watched some pros on YouTube to help, most of my improvement came from simply playing the game. I'd never thought about the similarities between Rocket League and Go, but had an epiphany when you mentioned it. When trying to improve at Go, I've spent way more time watching lectures and reading books than actually playing. I want to take a page from my experience with Rocket League and start playing more games of Go rather than spending so much time watching others play. My goal will be to enjoy actually playing the game of Go more, and I'm sure this, along with some lecture type material, will help me improve." That's awesome. Another Rocket League player, and just thinking about like a Rocket League Go player, it's pretty cool. They're really different games. Like I am the same way. Like Rocket League, I can jump in and it's like an arcade game, and you can it's almost like you turn your brain off and just let your muscles kind of do the work, and eventually you get experience and you get better. I'm not anywhere near as good as you, but in Go, it can get a little intense. Like it takes something out of you. I feel like when you play Go, it's like you have to focus for so long, and it's like it's a different kind of game for sure. But I do think that playing a lot of games, especially if you have not put in a lot of hours into the game, it will help you get the flow of the game a lot better. But I actually really just enjoy studying the game. Just as an act, like on its own. It's one of the things that I really enjoy about Go. Whereas I don't think I enjoy as much training on Rocket League, if that makes any sense. Ryan has more to say. He says, "The other topic I wanted to mention was about teaching the game to beginners. My ex-boyfriend at the time wanted to try playing it one day as he knew I played. He always saw me playing on the 19x19 and insisted on playing on this size board. No matter how much I insisted, it was not a good idea. Needless to say, he did not end up enjoying it too much, partly because of the size and partly because of how long it took to complete the game. He eventually just wanted to stop before the game was completed. I suppose, in hindsight, I could have refused to play unless it was on a 9x9, but then I think playing on a 19x19 is better than a new player not playing the game at all. It's hard to say. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this. All the best, Ryan. Well, Ryan, thanks for writing in, and that is a bit of a dilemma. Sometimes students are stubborn and they want to learn a certain way. I would say it's good that you tried playing with them, but like the thing is that 19x19 is pretty overwhelming, and I can see why he lost interest quickly, because my girlfriend doesn't even want to play 19x19. She just wants to stay on the 9x9, and I want to show her Joseki and stuff really badly, but it is important to get a lot of the fundamentals down on the 9x9. So I can't really say what the best thing to do is. It's better to expose them to the game, I guess, but I mean, maybe Go just isn't for everybody. That's the end of the story. Thanks for writing in, Ryan. Benjamin writes, "Hi Justin, I recently started playing Go again after a near 20-year break and just stumbled upon your podcast. I've been listening to the episodes in order and hoping to be caught up soon. Love the content. I started playing on OGS and I'm hovering around the 6K rank, but I haven't played that many games yet. My question to you is, what would you recommend for someone in my situation to catch up to the post-AI game of today? I feel like many of the things I knew now seem outdated, especially in regards to the openings. Do you have any resource recommendations like articles, books, or videos? Thanks, and keep up the good work, Benjamin." Well, Benjamin, thanks for your question. I would say don't worry about it too much. A lot of your stuff that you know will still be pretty solid. I can't say that you're gonna really be upended in that regard, but if you do want to get into it, I think the first thing that comes to mind for me is GoPro Yonu's video on 3-3 invasions. She does a really good explanation of how to handle 3-3 invasions, so looking at that Joseki video is probably a good introduction into the world of the new AI stuff. Other than that, I mean, half of us are still pretty lost, even though we've kept up with the game. So I don't think you have to worry. That one, and then the attached Joseki is the one where you do want to learn, where before you would have the approach to the 4-4 and then the slide. Now it's very common to attach. I think that's the other one that you want to maybe just learn. And then from there on out, like, it's just a matter of like any other kind of study, just explore your studies. So I'll try to link the Yonu video about the 3-3 invasions. Hopefully that is some help to you. Thanks for writing in, Benjamin. My boy writes in, "Wow, I was just opening your channel to find something to listen to, and there's a new upload. Really curious about this video. Every channel talks about before AI we might play this move, but I haven't seen anyone cover the difference in playstyle broadly. Thanks for writing in, my boy, and I'm just realizing maybe you haven't listened to the episode yet and you're just kind of pre-commenting. Thanks for the pre-comment. I hope to hear about what you thought of the episode. It's a hard topic to cover. I think things are still changing, so that's why maybe people don't really... it's a huge topic too. Like, you can't really cover everything, but I guess that's what Starpoint is about. It's about talking about general things where we don't have to get into the details and play things out on the board. So it's why maybe it's suitable for that kind of content. Thanks for writing in. Goran writes, "Loved the episode. It's the topic I suggested. Thanks." And by the way, he's talking about man versus machines. "I do like that AI is a thing. Like they said in the AlphaGo doc, now we can finally see what this game is really all about. I'm sure more players with a crazy, almost superhuman insight into AI like Shinjin-Saw will appear in the future, pushing the human limits of the game even higher. However, at my level, around 10Q, both professionals and AI seem so out of reach that it makes little difference to me, and an AI calculated difference of 0.2 points means nothing. Also, those moves are only better if I also play the next however many moves optimally, which is also not going to happen." Very good point, Garant. 0.2 points, I think maybe even to the professionals they don't really care about that much of a difference. Yeah, so I mean, you've touched on basically the thing that we have to be wary with the AI analysis. Goran continues to write, so ultimately for my play it makes little difference, except maybe that now people are going to handle Josekis differently and choose some variations over others. Like you said a few episodes ago, they're a bit like fashion trends. I also like the point about the AI only analyzing the board and not the player. Psychology and mind games are a fun and important part of the game. Funny thing, when IBM prepared Deep Blue for the second match with Kasparov, they built in some tricks specifically for Kasparov, hoping to trip him up. Here's a fantastic YouTube documentary about Deep Blue's history. It's funny how many parallels there were with the AlphaGo development. Somehow, I'll try to link that video that Goran linked here in the description as well. Somehow I feel like this story will be told yet again in the future. I don't know what it will be, but I just have a funny feeling about it. And the thing about the analyzing the board and not the player is not only just about the mind games, in my opinion, but also about like the human understanding of the moves on the board. It's just a little different. Like, sometimes you may look at a move and both players understand like that's an attacking move, whereas the AI will be like that is a bad move. And then it's just kind of like, I don't know how to explain it. I mean, I hope I did a good enough job in the AI Man vs. Machine episode. Thanks so much for your comment, Goran. And for the question of the week this week, I want to know, what do you think your Go condition is? And what steps have you taken to cure yourself? Were you successful in those endeavors, or are you still working on it and you need help? Let me know in the comments of wherever you're listening, or if it's on Reddit, the Reddit post for this episode, or you can email me directly at starpointbaduk@gmail.com. That's starpointbaduk@gmail.com. If you're a listener on YouTube, I would greatly appreciate a like and a subscribe. Listener reviews and ratings also help if you're on a podcasting platform. And a special thanks to Chris M for supporting Starpoint. And last week I told you about the type of hats that Go players like. And there's another type of hat that I didn't mention. You know what that type of hat is? It's a snapback. Those baseball caps with like the plastic snapback thingies? Anyway, thanks for listening. Keep playing Go.